All right. So, we are going to talk a lot about sex tonight. Okay. I'm glad y'all are on the front row. Here's what we're going to do. This is a very similar talk that I gave 3 years ago. So the current seniors, you've heard a lot of this stuff already, but you were measly freshmen back then. So I don't know what you remember. Probably not much from that long ago. But I'll give you some disclaimers tonight before we start. Okay? Disclaimer number 1 is this. My name is Tim, and I've had sex. Like a lot. Okay? Not just 3 times because I had 3 kids. Like, it's been a lot. Okay? Number 2 is, if you are here and you've had sex, I don't want you to feel guilty. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. All right? Number 3 is, we're going to talk about some pretty tough topics tonight. If you looked at your handout, you can probably guess some of the things we're going to talk about. And I want you guys to be real and vulnerable with me tonight. Okay? It's probably going to be uncomfortable for some of you. But, the past 4 weeks we've been talking about temptation. And honestly, when middle schoolers are in the room and girls are in the room, I have to kind of beat around the bush a little bit. Tonight, I don't. I want to talk to you guys as men tonight, okay? And we're going to start with a story. Anybody like stories? Yeah. So this is from a book, When Young Men Are Tempted, Sexual Purity for Guys in the Real World. And this is the story. Here it goes. Imagine this scenario. You're 13 years old, which none of you are 13. You're all older. And you're a car freak. Your friends are into cars too, and that's practically all you talk about. You admire their rides on the streets. You check them out in magazines and websites. You draw pictures of them in school. You've got car fever. And one day, you open the garage to take out the trash, and there it is. The sweetest, sleekest, fastest looking car you've ever seen. Or at least that's the way you imagine it looks. The car itself is under a big drop cloth. So you can't imagine actually what it is, but you know it's something spectacular. And the best part is parked in your own garage. Just then, your parents walk in with big smiles on their faces. How do you like it? Your dad asks. And you just grin at him. Good, he says, because it's yours. Your jaw hits the floor. Your father and I love you very much, your mom explains, and we know how happy this car will make you, so we want you to have it. But then your dad throws in the kicker. It's yours to drive as soon as you turn 25. Your smile fades. 25? That's 12 years from now, you protest. I'll be old enough to drive it in 3 years. We understand, your parents reply. But trust us, if you wait until after high school and college, you'll appreciate the car a lot more. You won't be as tempted to drive as recklessly. Plus, your insurance rates will go down. While you still stare in amazement, your parents lay out the ground rules. Your car will be kept in the garage under its protective covering until your 25th birthday. Then it will be yours to drive for the rest of your life. What would you think of a gift like this? How hard would it be to accept the terms your parents gave you? Before you answer, let's fast forward a few years. You now have your driver's license. As far as the law is concerned, you're free to drive your car anytime you want. But your parents won't budge on the terms. To make matters worse, all your friends are starting to get their license and drive cars. They talk about how much fun it is and how cool it is to drive around. They brag about what good drivers they are. And of course, they make fun of you for not driving your own car. When you get a girlfriend, the situation becomes even more urgent. She starts dropping hints about how nice it would be if the two of you could go for a drive in your car. You manage to make excuses for a while, but she keeps getting more insistent. At one point, she tells you that if you really love her, you'll ignore her parents' rules and take her for a ride in the car. Adding to your pressure is the fact that everywhere you look, TV, movies, magazines, music videos, billboards, you see people enjoying their cars. And every scene reminds you that you can't join in the fun just yet. Under those conditions, no one would blame you if you started to question your parents' guidelines, would they? Or if you started to spend more time in the garage, peeking under the car cover, taking a look at what's waiting for you. But the excitement of peeking would only last for so long. At some point, you want to take the cover completely off to get a better look at your car. And then you'll want to open the car door and climb behind the wheel. Of course, you want to hear how the car sounds. So when the time is right, you'll jump in and fire up the engine. Maybe even rev it a few times just to feel its awesome power. And after a while, though, even that thrill would fade. And then you'll be faced with the biggest decision of all. Do you blow off your parents' wishes and start enjoying your present whenever you get the urge to drive? Or do you resist temptation? Do you listen to what your parents tell you and keep the car in the garage until your 25th birthday, even if that means waiting 9 more years? Taking the car out will be a lot of immediate pleasure. It might even make you popular with your friends, not to mention your dates. But it would hurt your parents, the one who loved you enough to give you the gift in the first place. Quite the dilemma, isn't it? So James chapter 1, verse 17 says this, that every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. And guess what? Sex fits into that category. It may not be perfect, but it is definitely good. And we have God to thank for that. And so just like the parents in the story, God has given you this incredible gift, and that is the ability to experience sexual pleasure because he loves you. And like the parents in the story, God has laid out some requirements for this, some guidelines for this, for using this gift. Specifically, he wants you to wait until what?
Marriage.
Until marriage, right? He wants you to wait until marriage to unwrap it. But here's a problem. Most guys don't get married until mid-20s to late 20s. It's getting later by the year. It was early to mid-20s. Now it's even beyond that. However, you start experiencing intense sexual urges in your early to mid-teens. All right? So there you are. He's even wearing a Surge shirt. So that is the difference between 10 and 15 years between when you start experiencing these sexual urges and when you'll likely get married. Some people get married earlier, some people get married later, but there it is. That's a long time. There's a huge gap between your physical ability to do sexual things, which happens when you hit puberty, or as my kids used to call it, puberty, and the legal ability to do sexual things, at least according to God's standards, which is only ours at marriage. So what happens to your sex drive in the meantime? Guess what? It doesn't go away. Like it doesn't just disappear until you get married one day to your wedding day, but it sits in the garage of your life waiting for that day to be used. So you have this gift, and you have access to it 24/7. And if you're like most guys, it's never too far from your mind. And if that's not tempting enough, you live in a culture that doesn't shy away from it. It doesn't seem to care about God's standards for this gift. It's in the movies, it's in commercials, it's in social media, it's in TV shows. Sex is everywhere that we look. It's in our culture, it's in our world, it's in your schools, it's everywhere you turn. How many of you guys, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was this commercial for Hardee's several years ago that was very seductive. You guys remember that? It was this commercial where this, I was going to say half-naked lady, but she was like mostly naked, was sitting on this couch, pretty much in a bikini, eating this juicy burger, and it was like dripping down her face and stuff, and it was very provocative. I want to show you this picture just for a few seconds. This is an ad for Hardee's right here. Okay? That's all we're going to show you. Even that will get some of your motors running and it shouldn't. And that was That was the PG-13 one. All right. Don't go home and Google Hardee's commercials. You don't. That's not good. That won't pop up on the flags and stuff. But so you have these urges, right? When you're young, you guys, you're old enough to have these sexual urges, and then the day comes, right? The day comes that you get a girlfriend, or at least you start hanging out with girls, and then the situation becomes even worse. Sooner or later, you'll run into girls who would like to mess around and like to do things that maybe you shouldn't be doing. And if you're at the right place at the right time, or maybe the wrong place at the wrong time, you'll end up making a decision that maybe you will regret one day. And we talk a lot about guardrails here. And hey, Dalton, can you hand me my water? I left it back there. We talk a lot about guardrails here, and that idea of setting up things in our lives. Thank you, you're a lifesaver. The idea of setting up things in our lives to protect us from the temptations that we have. So here's a good example. I think it's a good example. Let's say you want to play a game of pickup football, flag football with your friends, right? You have your friends, you have the field, you have the football. What is one thing you need to do before you play the game? You have the people. You have teams. Lay out the field. You got to lay out the boundaries of the field, right? So you got to know what is inbounds and out of bounds. You got to know where the end zones are and the goal lines are. You have to determine what's inbounds and out of bounds. You could try to play without boundaries, but what's going to happen? You'll get frustrated or be confused very quickly. If you're going to play the game right, you need to know how far you can go and still be in bounds. So the same goes for sex. Like, you got to know where your boundaries are when it comes to this. So just like the example with the car analogy, you may give in to that desire and start exploring your ability to experience sexual pleasure. The first few times it may seem harmless. You may even check out some websites or flip through some pornography. But that would only satisfy your curiosity for a little while. Sooner or later, you want to try something different. Like, the fantasy world will only work for a certain amount of time until you want to do it with a real person. And next thing you know, you're sleeping with your girlfriend, and you've given up the one true gift that you can give your future wife one day, which is your purity. Romans 12:1 says this, that therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Guys, a sacrifice is something that people offer to God to show their faithfulness. What does that have to do with a guy's body? Saving yourself until marriage is a huge sacrifice. It's a huge sacrifice. God isn't punishing you by asking you to wait for sex. He's giving you this incredible opportunity, a window of about 10 to 15 years between puberty and marriage to offer this sacrifice to God, this gift with your body. So sex matters. It's the most vulnerable thing that you'll ever do. Commitment breeds intimacy. And intimacy is what makes sex freaking awesome. It does. Now, you can have sex outside of that committed relationship, but mostly it's going to be like clumsy or just meh, just kind of whatever. It may satisfy you. It may be good in that moment, but afterwards, man, you're going to feel the shame. You're going to feel the guilt. You're going to feel the whatever in your life. So let me share it this way, and I want to be vulnerable with you guys tonight. I did not have sex until I was married. Okay, I was 23 maybe. Sex on my wedding night was It was okay. Sex 5 years into marriage was like, okay. Sex 10 years into marriage was like, whoa. Guys, I've been married for 20 years now. Sex 20 years into marriage is a whole lot better than sex 10 years ago. Why? Because we're closer. We're more intimate. I know Tiffany. She knows me. 20 years from now, I can't imagine what it's going to be like. Like your grandparents who've been married for 50 or 60 years, I bet, okay, we'll stop there. So go ahead and wait. And while you're waiting, enjoy the waiting. Now, if you've already have gone too far, you've already had sex, you've already got her done, or whatever it is, and you're not sure, or you feel guilty, or you're kind of walking this walk of shame day in and day out, please hear this. Please hear this. It is okay. Like, I'm not saying this to give you an excuse to have sex because it's okay, but you're so much more than your sexuality. And the God of the universe, listen to this, the God of the universe, the one who turned prostitutes into heroes, the one who turned drunkards into prophets, the one who turned liars and murderers into kings, that same God, he made peace with you and me and our pathetic attempts to find love and to be loved a long time ago, and he gave you a redeemer. So shame should no longer be a burden on us. So waiting takes what is let me ask this. What is the last fruit of the Spirit? Anybody know this? Self-control. Self-control. Waiting for sex takes self-control, which is the fruit of the Spirit. And I want to read this quote. This is on the screens here. It says, a man or woman, for that matter, who has a sense of mastery over their own sexual appetite would be far less likely to fall into the easy traps of addiction and infidelity that plague marriages today. I know it's hard to be near a girl that you're aching to touch and to kiss and to do other naked things with, but the person that you're with right now, likely, for the most part, for most of you, the one that you're having these imaginations over, likely would not be the last girl that you have these thoughts about. So for you to practice this self-control now at your age is hugely important. It's hugely important because, listen, one day you will get married. For most of you, 98% of you will be married one day. And it's so important that you practice self-control now so that you can have self-control when you're married. Otherwise, you're going to be one of the statistics of divorce or infidelity or adultery in your marriage, or looking at pornography while you're married to your wife. People think at your age, because I thought at your age, that if I can just get married, then I can have sex anytime I want to, and I don't have to worry about pornography anymore. That is a lie. You can't have sex anytime you want to. It takes two people to have sex, by the way. I don't know if you know this. And it's not, you just can't have it anytime you want to. I'm getting off my notes. I got to stay with my notes because this is important stuff. So what is purity? Let's talk through this. Purity is freedom of sin or guilt. So if we're going to talk about purity, then we have to talk about sex. And like I said, sex is freaking amazing, but it has to be the way God created it to be. Otherwise, it can be messy. It can be sticky. That might be a wrong word. 1 Corinthians 6:18. So Corinth, right? Corinth was a city full of sexual sin, like prostitutes and sex everywhere you turn. And Paul is talking to the church in Corinth, and this is what he says. It says, run from sexual sin. Flee from it. Get away from it. He says, no other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. So we live in a culture, we talked about this, that is bombarded with sex. And what we're telling you, and basically what the Bible is telling you, is to do the opposite of probably what everything else you hear in our culture, that you hear out there. So when we talk about purity, it's possible, but it is up to you if you want this in your life, if you have this in your life. And listen, some of you haven't had sex, so you're feeling pretty good right now. Like you haven't had physical sex with anyone, so you're like, okay, I feel good. Like I'm pure, like I haven't had sex yet. But purity goes so much more than just having sex. It is oral sex. It is anal sex. It is you going down your girl's pants and your girl going down your pants. Okay? Sex is so much more than just sex. So is purity still possible? Yes, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. So how do we stay pure? So look at some of these. This is in your handout. Number one is prayer and share. These are big ones. And I'll share a little bit of my story later, but about with pornography. But guys, listen, pray. Like, pray about it, for real. Like, prayer is the most we can do. If you're struggling with it in this area, pray, talk to God about it. And then share. Like, share it with somebody else. Have someone that can hold you accountable in these areas. On dates, don't do it alone. If you struggle in this area of purity, don't go on a date with your girlfriend by yourself. Do double dates, triple dates, group dates. Go out in public. Don't kiss sitting down. Kiss standing up only. Because what happens? If you sit down, you have the tendency of laying down. And your hands will go to places that they shouldn't be going. You're going to disrespect the girl that you're with. Okay? So don't do anything you wouldn't do if your mom was in the room with you, or your grandma, or her mom, or her grandma, or whoever. Or her dad might even be a better scenario. Check this one out. Date someone with the same values as you. Date someone who also wants to stay pure. If you're dating someone who doesn't have a relationship with Christ or doesn't care about her purity, guess what? You're going to fall short with this. Listen, when Tiffany and I were dating and then engaged, you think we were tempted to have sex? Yep. Yeah. I'm human. And guys, listen, there were moments that I was weak, that I would have had sex with Tiffany before we got married. But that was the moments that she was strong. And there were moments that she was weak, that she would have had sex with me, and those were the moments that I was strong. You guys have to date someone with the same values if you want to remain pure and stay pure. Next one is set up guardrails with that person. And let me say this, because this is all guys in this room. If you're dating a girl, you need to be the one who initiates this conversation. Say, all right, here's some guidelines, here's some guardrails that we need to set up so that we can stay pure. We're not going to kiss sitting down. We're not going to do dates alone. We're not going to be under the same blanket during a movie. Whatever guidelines or guardrails that you need set up for you, it's going to be different for all of us. Set those guardrails up ahead of time so that when you're in that situation, it's too late to set up guardrails. If you're in a movie and it's dark and you're under a blanket together and you're whatever, that is not the time to set up guardrails because your mind is not on setting up guardrails. You need to set up guardrails way, 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 way ahead of time if you want to stay pure. And then lastly is this, don't feed the monster. Don't feed the impurity. Don't look at pornography. That is only a fantasy world. Remember, we've been talking about this, that what you feed, what? Grows. If you feed that monster, it's going to grow. Your sexual appetite will grow stronger and bigger and bigger and bigger as a result. So, what is pornography? If we want to, this is just to make sure we're on the same page. This is any picture, video, or graphic of sex, or a sexual act, or body parts that is designed to arouse the end viewer. Hopefully I don't have to define that. Hopefully you're understanding that. So anything that you see that causes you to lust over that person is pornography. That means you could watch a TV show and it could be pornography. It doesn't have to be they're naked, just whatever. It could be a music video. Like years ago when Wrecking Ball came out, I was like, whoa, that should not, that's like soft porn right there. It could be a Hardee's commercial. All right. Anything that causes you to lust. And here's, I'm not an expert, non-expert opinion, pornography is the number one sin that guys struggle with. And it's becoming even a very large sin that girls struggle with. When I was growing up, man, I had to work hard to find pornography. Like it wasn't just there. I remember the first time I saw it. My friend, I was probably 10 or 11. He came and showed me pictures. I was like, whoa. I was too young for it to really affect me, but there it was. I was exposed to it. And listen, as hard as it was for me to find it, it is just as easy for you to find it. Because most of you carried it with you tonight. It's in your pockets, or you're holding it in your hand right now. We're never more than just arm's length away from it. You have more access to media than any other generation who has ever lived. And you have grown up with the internet always there. Always with you. Having this technology, it has its benefits. But guys, it also comes with easier access to pornographic material that is always with you. Most studies say this, that 90% of boys, teenage boys, have been exposed to pornography by the age of 18. 90%. 60% of girls have been exposed by 18, with the average age of first exposure being 12 years old. And even a more recent study said that the average age of exposure in this particular study was 9.6 for girls and 9.9 for boys. So girls even being exposed to it earlier than boys now. And there's this graphic. Hopefully you can see it okay. How did first exposure? Did I lose my... pornography occur? This is that same study of the young ones. So 61% was accidental. They didn't mean to, for boys. Or for girls. 50% for guys. 32%, it was shown to them by someone else. 40% guys, it was shown. 7 and 10%, they actually looked for it. They sought it out. So you can see, in other words, that most initial exposure was either accidental or it was shown to them by someone else. Very few people actually seek it out for the first time. Ephesians 5 says this. It says, among you there must not even be a what? A hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. You might reason with yourself and say, you know what, I don't struggle with pornography, but you will linger on that Instagram account because it shows her thighs. Or you'll linger on certain things, or you'll see a girl with those short shorts and you'll just stare a little bit longer than you should. No. It says there shouldn't even be a hint of sexual immorality. What do you think about that, Tristan?
Man, that's pretty difficult.
A hint. So you might, Paul says we have to fight for this. If you want this in your life, you have to fight for it. It's not going to, guys, you're surrounded with it. I've been to your schools. I've seen how the girls dress. I've seen the movies that you've watched. I've seen the TV shows that you've watched. I've seen the commercials. I've seen the ads. I've been there. I'm a human too. It is surrounded by you. That shouldn't be a hint. So, I did this 3 years ago. I'm going to do it again today. I don't know. My mic is my mic going in and out?
It has to be up above the table.
Above the table?
Yeah, antennas are weak.
Oh, I see. You don't have to participate. You don't have to play ball if you don't want to play ball. But I want to ask you the question: how many of you guys have been exposed to pornography? Raise your hand. Guys, look around. You can put your hands down. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So what is wrong with looking at porn? First of all, looking at porn increases the market for such material. The more you look at it, the more you're feeding that market, and the more that they would produce. Number 2 is the porn industry is filled with victims of sexual molestation and involvement in businesses that only deepen their pain. It supports sex trafficking. A lot of the girls that's in these pornography videos, they're not doing it by choice. They're sex slaves. They don't have a choice. They're in this business and they can't get out of this business. So when you watch it, you're supporting that. you're feeding that business. Number 3 is it will stay in your mind for way too long. What you look at for 20 seconds will take 20 years for you to get those images out of your mind. And when you get married one day and you do have sex with your future wife one day, you don't want those images burned in your mind from 20 years ago or 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 2 hours ago. And number 4, porn is often a starting point for sexual addictions. So what does porn do to you? It starts innocently, but it leads you to harder stuff. What starts you online is only this fantasy world would no longer fulfill you. Guys, the habits you develop now will carry on into your adult life. And I can tell you that there's many, many men who are married who have an addiction to pornography, and it's killing their marriages. It's addicting. So how do we stay away from it? 1 is go to God with it. Guys, I struggled with this for a few years, many years, your age and older. And I don't know how to explain it. I prayed that God would take it away. And one day, that desire for me to look at pornography disappeared. I have no explanation for it because I was feeding that monster. But that desire, it was not overnight, but it was pretty quick. And it's before I got married, okay? So I can't use that excuse. So go to God with it. Like, seriously, if you're struggling with this, talk to God. Say, God, take this away from me. And He may take it away immediately. He may take it away a year from now or 10 years from now. I don't know. That's one of the things. You need to talk to God about it. Number 2 is talk to someone else about it, about your struggle. Guys, we saw the hands raised that you were exposed to it. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands if you're struggling with it right now, but there's people in this room who are struggling with pornography. Okay? Talk to somebody else about it. Someone that will hold you accountable, who would get in your face and says, hey, this is not you. This is not what you should do. There's programs out there that you can put on your phone to help protect you from this stuff. X3 Watch is one of them. There's Covenant Eyes. I mean, there's tons of them out there. Number 3 is decide today to clean it up. Figure out what is causing you to stumble and get rid of it. If it's a site, if it's a TV channel, if it's a girlfriend, man, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Turn the other way. Proverbs 26:11 says this. It says, a fool goes back to his sin like a dog goes back to his vomit. Guys, the only way that a dog won't go back to his vomit is if they clean up the vomit. We got to clean it up so that we don't go back to it. The more you feed it, the more you do it, the bigger it becomes. Remember, what you feed grows. What you starve dies. So, can we get awkward for a few minutes? Yeah. The more time we spend here, the less time you can spend in your small group, which will be really awkward. Let's talk about masturbation. Yeah. It's going there. So what is God's stance on masturbation? And I'm going to say masturbation a lot, so let's just get used to it. Some say this. Well, Tim, what if I think about fruit while masturbating? Is that okay? And then it's not a sin, right? Or what if I give God the glory while masturbating? Can it be right? No. Our stance reflects our interpretation of God's perspective on purity, and it's rooted in Scriptures. Now, granted, listen. There's nowhere in Scripture that God says, thou shalt not masturbate. But Scripture is filled with passages about how to keep your mind clean and to flee from sexual immorality and all these things. So 5 things about masturbation. Yes, we'll talk about them. 5 things about masturbation. 1, masturbation increases sexual desires. Remember, what you feed, what? Grows. When you masturbate, there are endorphins that are released into your body during that process of looking at pornography. And these endorphins are the addictive qualities of those things that are relatable to the addictive quality of cocaine and heroin. So the urge for more sexual gratification becomes greater and greater. There's these endorphins those feelings that you have when you release that, man, I want that again. The next day, 2 hours from now, whatever, you want to release those endorphins. The more you do that, it's an addictive drug. And the more you feed it, the bigger it becomes. And a lot of us, we justify it by saying, well, I masturbate so that I don't have sex, so I don't actually have sex. No, masturbation would not solve anything, but rather create this monster in you that you simply do not want. Number 2 is this. Habitual masturbation consistently creates distance from God. The sexual immorality, it creates a distance between you and God. Number 3 is this. The pornography and fantasy that surround masturbation changes the way we view women. Guys, the girls that you are attracted to, they are daughters of God. One of them is my daughter. Some of them are other daughters in this room. The way we view them, they're not just objects. And that's what we do. When we masturbate, when we're looking at pornography, all they are objects to satisfy our desires. We don't see them as human. Number 4, habitual masturbation is hard to stop. We talked about this. Beating a dead horse here. You're more likely to masturbate the day after you masturbated. Did you know that? Than you are the day you didn't. Why? Because what you feed grows and what you starve dies. In other words, the pleasurable chemical reactions draw you to repeat the practice more and more. And number 5 is this. Masturbation can be controlled. Talk about it. When you ask someone to pray for you or you confess it, then it will release this huge weight off of you. Guys, we all struggle with this. This is something that we're all going to struggle at some point in our lives if you don't struggle yet. Okay, we'll end it with this. I was debating on doing this or not doing this. We'll end it with this. Let's talk about foreplay for a second. So we said earlier, there shouldn't be a what? There shouldn't be a hint of sexual immorality, right? So foreplay would constitute as that. So what exactly is foreplay? So clearly, caressing the breasts is foreplay. Why? Because intercourse is likely to follow if you're touching the breasts. If not with her tonight, at least with her in your mind later on, probably. Masturbation while fantasizing about specific girls or over certain pictures is the same as doing it. Jesus talked about this. He says, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, but I tell you that if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Jesus got to the facts. So what else is foreplay? Mutual stroking of the genitals is foreplay. Even stroking the top of the thigh can be foreplay. You may not see this foreplay, but I bet you any father sees it as foreplay. If a girl lays her head on your lap, that can be foreplay. That may be a mild form, but if it gets your motor running, it's foreplay. Even slow dancing can be foreplay. If your body touches and it's causing you to want to touch her other places, anything to get your mind going and your body going, that's foreplay. I'm not saying you cannot have physical touch. That's not what I'm saying. No, holding hands, arm in arm, snuggling on the couch, whatever, those things can be fine. Kissing can be fine. But heavy kissing around the neck, that's foreplay. Because it usually leads to other things. James 1:14. We'll end it with this verse. And this is a verse I've talked about quite a few times. But it says, each person is lured and enticed by his own desire. Lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death. And we talked about this. I usually have the lure up here, and I talk about how when you go fishing, you have the lure, and the fish attracts to the lure. Guys, that idea of lure, man, the enemy wants to lure you guys into this. He wants to stir your affection, get your attention and stir your affection so that you will fall into temptation, that you will enact the will, which is sin. Guys, this happens even with me still today. I am tempted, just like you're tempted, to look at things I shouldn't be looking at, to look at women I shouldn't be looking at. That's why I have to have guardrails in my life. That's why I have to be prayed up and get into God's word. Because I am not above temptation. Just because I work at a church doesn't mean I'm above temptation. I'm not above temptation. Joe Hishma, our lead pastor, would tell you he is not above temptation. You are not above temptation. Your leaders are not above temptation. We all have temptation in our lives. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. Guys, your purity is a gift from God. Let me pray for us, and you guys have about 15 minutes in your community groups. Jesus, I pray for the guys in this room. Guys, my prayer that some of them would just take a stand tonight against the impurities of this world, the desires that this world tells us is okay. And that we will fight against flesh and blood, fight against the temptations that this world throws at us every single day. And God, it's my prayer that we will set up guardrails and things in our lives that will help us to stay pure. That we will confess it, not just to you, but to other people that can help us and hold us accountable. God, it's my prayer that these young men will grow up to be men of God who know you and love you and pursue you. That when they get married, that they will marry a woman of God who knows you, loves you, and pursues you. That they can give this gift of their purity one day to their future wife. That is my prayer. That's my desire. And for those that have screwed up, those that have messed up in this area of sexuality, God, I pray that they would just receive the grace and mercy from you, God. That they can be redeemed of that. And from this day forward, they can say, yes, from this day forward, I want to stay pure for my future wife. God, guide these conversations that we're about to have. We love you, Jesus, and we pray this in your name. Amen. All right, guys.